Alright, it looks like I'm live. Let me go and check out my stuff here. Let's see, is my mic coming in okay? Let's look at this. Oh, that's weird. Oh, now it's working. Okay. So, hello again. This is Jeff from Peterson Academy student. I'm here to do my part 2 of my overview of the Intro to Psychology course in Peterson Academy. So we are on the 6th, Love and Attraction. So today I'm going to go over 6 and 7, Love and Attraction, and mental health. Unfortunately, I didn't really get a chance to get through 8. Been well, life is lifey, you know, so I can only get so much done at a time. Get my notes in order. So we're going to go through that now. So Love and Attraction starts with the psychology of the dyad. Oh, let's get my notes up here. There we go. So we have the psychology of the dyad. The dyad is a group of two. The psychology changes in relationships from individuals to seeing yourself as a group. There's a dynamic between individuality and connection. And then we also tend to form a transactive memory. We might split memory between the members of the dyad. You know, that what he says, one person might take care of the home, and someone else might take care of everything else. Like, I personally take care of finances. My wife deals with most of the cleaning and most of the kids stuff, and of course I have a job. She stays at home, so we have a pretty good split there. Becoming something bigger than oneself is it's sort of the move from that singular psychology into a group psychology, but the dyad is one of the fundamental sets from the group. Then we have the Schopenhauer illustration of the two porcupines that get closer to each other, and then they poke each other and then move away. So there's this interplay between our individuality and that connection we share with the other member of the dyad. The theoretical models on love and attraction tend to come from evolutionary psychology. The lecture has 3 parts. He talks about attraction, love, and commitment. Relationships are challenging in the modern era due to a high focus on individuality. I don't know what he's comparing it to, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is internet and stuff like that makes it more difficult. So then we have the love stories that consist of splitting away from family or culture to connect to a partner. The Tristan and Isolde story is one that came up. Romeo and Juliet, which is what we're all most familiar with. So then we have the relationships. Oh, I already was there. Love can be a hero's journey. So we're going to start with the attraction now. People tend to self-report being attracted to things like kindness, trustworthiness, honesty, humor, confidence, and positive emotion. And but in the Walster experiment, a computer dating study, I believe it's from the 60s or 70s, they in reality, people tend to default to physical attractiveness in mate selection. So there's some of your red pill philosophy there. There is some truth to it. So of course, this is talking about like pure attraction, like what you find attractive. It doesn't really talk about anything further than that. So people are attracted to physical signs like facial symmetry, averageness of facial features, like those things where you see like all the facial features put together into one one face, and that's kind of the ideal that people tend to have. Kind of varies based on culture, but attractiveness tends toward the average. Extremes have little impact. It says that possibly one or two things that are, having something that's a little extreme but not too extreme. He also talked about height, and how above average height is good, but there's a certain point where it's not necessarily going to give you much of a help and just makes your life hard. People are also attracted to similarity. People that are similar to themselves. Ellen Burscheid, Elaine Hatfield's similarity attraction theory. People are attracted to something similar to their ideal they see for themselves. So it's not always like exact similarity. It might be somebody who sees, who like is shy but values, like wants to be extroverted, so they are attracted to somebody who's confident. So there's that. Love can also be a reaction as an expression of independence. So like mom telling you not to hang out with that guy, and you just want to do it anyways, stuff like that. Relationships of similarity can be less passionate, but they tend to be more stable. So if you get with somebody too different from you, it can also cause instability, but it can also cause more passion. They get into that later. Human gender tends to place the most reproductive value on the female, and that's based on Robert Trivers' parental investment theory. The parent that invests the most to the offspring is most selective, and as it happens to work for humans, women have more to lose in relationships. Their eggs are finite. He didn't talk about this, but I think it's interesting because you basically, a human is born with all the eggs they're ever going to have for their whole life. But men just continually generate sperm forever. So there's that's why, when you sell eggs are sold, they're way more expensive, and sperm, is a dime a dozen, or dime a million, I suppose. There's a lot of those sperms. It's getting weird. All right. So yeah, that's he also though mentioned, that it's a thing that maps onto gendered humans, but it's not always the case for everybody. It just happens to be that the females of our species carry that higher investment. He mentioned seahorses that have have a pouch that they actually move that after the egg's fertilized, the male carries the egg, so that causes it to be more. Yeah. Anyways, situations and environment have a large effect on attractiveness. This part I thought was pretty crazy. So there's the arousal attraction effect. Physiological arousal can lead to attraction, and this is based. He mentions the Dutton and Aaron's bridge study, where they put people on a rickety bridge and put people on a stable bridge. They witnessed how attracted they were to the person that was running the experiment. People were more attracted to the experimenter when they were on the rickety bridge. That's just because when you have that emotional arousal, and we think of the word arousal kind of sound, we have a sexual connotation put to it, but it's not that. It's just a general rising of the emotion. So but they theorize that the physiological arousal caused by fear and other things can actually cause that greater attraction. It can also be called the misattribution of arousal or excitation transfer. So it's your mind may confuse that emotional high for a sexual arousal. So that's pretty interesting. And then they had the Gergen deviance in the dark study, where they put a bunch of people in a dark room and saw what happened. Sometimes, and it was in the 70s, people were tended to in the dark room. They put people in a dark room and people in a light room. People in the dark room were um, getting close to each other and touching each other, and like some people were like trying to kiss each other and stuff like that. Then they call that the de-individuation effect, where people are more impulsive when you mask their individual identity. So we have the darkness, and costumes are another way to create de-individuation. Um, we have the fear affiliation effect. That's people who I mean, that's just related to the earlier thing. So people want connection in stressful scenarios. Um, we're and that seems to be related to our ancestors, their ability to be to need to affiliate to survive in the environment. People that were alone tend to die. People who got together with others and formed groups would survive. So then we have the Schachter's shock experiment. You had people wait in a line for an electric shock. People who gave the option to wait, to have other people wait with them for their shock. It wasn't a bad shock, but people always wanted to tend to wait with others when they're in line for something scary. So then he also mentions the concept of liminality, which is the transitional phase between two stages or places. We have it's based off of the superliminal and subliminal. It's the conscious and unconscious. Those are psychological concepts. We have rituals that take place in liminal spaces. He mentions church, like with dim lights, and religious rituals. Dawn and dusk are examples of liminal spaces because they're between the light and the dark. People tend to find connection in liminal spaces. And he has the Arthur Aaron relationship formation studies. The ideal place for attraction is in dim lighting with costumes, and also with substances like alcohol can also help with that. And it says it's hard to fall in love under fluorescent lights, which is a cute little saying. So then he gets into the love. How do we get from attraction to full-on love and relationships? So one of the ways people can do that is with reciprocal self-disclosure, by disclosing personal information between people evenly. We can expand our knowledge and skills. And then the self-expansion model. So the self-expansion model shows that when you connect with other people, when you get with another person and you start to get introduced to their world, your understanding and skills and knowledge can increase. And he unfortunately used a Twilight reference in order to make this point. And it's even though it's actually a pretty good illustration, because basically Bella in that movie, she fell in love with a vampire, and then her world expanded and she got introduced to this world of vampires, and there was intense passionate love in that. And that's what can happen when you rapid self-expansion can lead to intense passionate love, but it can also cause relationships to stale as expansion slows. We can continue by expanding by sharing those experiences with others. That's a way. I think that was like an aside that he did. So you can actually share experiences with your partner to increase that expansion. If you're feeling stale in a relationship, so that's a preview of what happens later. And he asks, "What is love?" So the love models are really interesting to me. So he's got the Robert Sternberg triangular model, which has, like a triangle, 3 points. We have the passion, which is the sexual erotic energy. We have intimacy, which is knowing and understanding, and commitment, intentionality, and desire to maintain the relationship. So those three different parts of love. So we have different ways to call certain individuals. So we have the consummate love, which is an all-encompassing love that has all three: passion, intimacy, and commitment. That's what you are supposed to be working towards if you are interested in relationships. You got the romantic love, which is the passion and intimacy without commitment. We have companionate love, which is intimate intimacy and commitment without passion. And then we have the fatuous, or what's called Las Vegas love, which is passion and commitment without intimacy. So like, um, the romantic love is kind of what you feel before you really like get to like a thinking about marriage and stuff. Companion is kind of what you feel with friends, but you can also feel it in a relationship. I know that sometimes people that are stale in a marriage feel that way. They feel like they're just friends, but there's no passion in their relationship. And then the Las Vegas love is kind of something where you like just decide you're gonna commit to somebody without any of that knowing or intimacy, which can lead to disaster. Sometimes it can work, sometimes usually it does not. He's mentioned that our culture tends to start with a passionate love, and then we kind of just hope for the other two to show up, which according to me, I think it's better to at least start thinking about commitment early, but that's just me. Then we have the John Allen Lee's Colors of Love, which later became Clyde and Susan Hendricks' Love Attitude Scale. So we have this one, which is Eros, the passionate love that people feel. That's like the passion. Ludus is a game playing love. Or is it Ludus? Ludus? Yeah, I think it's Ludus. Game playing love, manipulative love, where the principle of least interest applies. People, the least committed member of the relationship holds all the power. So the Storge is the friendship love. We have our pragmatic, rational love, or shopping list love, which is people, thinking about love as just a list of things that you need in that person. Then we have the mania. If it was just mania or if it was manic. But either way, it's a possessive, clingy love. It's also a dangerous one. It's not really based on reason. It says that it can also be kind of like stalking love is like this. Then we have agape, which is the selfless giving love, which is a love that's mentioned a lot in the Bible. It's a selfless giving love, which is how people perceive like figures like Jesus to have that selfless love where they're willing to sacrifice, not ask too much in return. So then he went over the commitment section. So we have the satisfaction, which is rewards versus cost. We have a quality of alternatives. Maybe there's somebody better out there. The internet can create an illusion of alternatives, and that's kind of makes it difficult to commit in our current scenarios. We have we think that we can just get with whoever, and they always look better than they are on the internet and stuff like that. So we have the investment, which is not wanting to give up what was put in. Kids, property, friendship networks, and time are also examples of that. And then we have the sunk cost fallacy, where people may want to stay in something where they feel like they've invested a lot and don't want to give it up. Sometimes it's a good reason to continue a relationship. Sometimes it's something that prevents you from leaving a relationship that's too bad. So then he gave different mechanisms for keeping relationships going. As to develop cognitive interdependence with the other person, as something that we tend to avoid because people don't want to be dependent on other people, but it's actually kind of important. We are social creatures. Then we have the willingness to sacrifice, which is people, how somebody is, as an example with my wife, I had to eventually asked her to leave her job and stay home because I could make enough money to handle everything on her own. So, and she didn't want to. She turned out to like it in the end, but for the most part, yeah, that's how that works. Willingness to sacrifice something for the other. I kind of have to sacrifice a little bit because I have to stay in jobs I don't really like because my income runs the family, and that is my willingness to sacrifice to keep my relationship strong. So we got our partner enhancement, where we psychologically raise the level of our spouse's attractiveness. We have other partner derogation, where we can subconsciously lower the value of other people. And then other couple derogation, where we might, pick apart a relationship of another person of other people to make our relationship seem better. And we have the accommodation, which is a really interesting one. So we have repaying negativity. So when the one person does something negative in the relationship, we have 4 choices. We have we have passive positive action and active positive action. We have passive destructive action and active destructive action. And what we need to move towards is, when it's up to us, when one partner does something negative, like yells or whatever, there's a lot of things that can happen. We would we should respond with a positive action, as kind of like breaking the cycle. Yeah, sure, you can always repay negative with negative, but that's just not how we should do it in relationships. You just kind of build it up with those positive actions, and it can have a really intense, like, what do you call it, disarming effect on the other person. So if we just react positively to the negativity of the other. So then they divided it into 4 parts: the exit, voice, loyalty, and neglect, which are I can't really remember the specific explanations of all those, but it has to do with the passive positive, passive active positive. Demands of outside obligations make accommodation difficult. So we go to work and we don't we go to work and we work hard all day, and we just kind of bite our tongue, and we kind of build up that negative energy, and then we go home and we just release it. This is something that I always have trouble with myself. Sometimes I gotta just make sure that I'm nice to, as nice as I can be when I get home from work and stuff. So then you also go, and then another way to help your relationship is to avoid negative action. Regulate your own emotions and stuff. You can pursue therapy or whatever to deal with your issues, change your job. There's a lot of different ways that we can try to regulate our own selves in order to deal with the relationship. So, like, my personal thoughts is, like, I'm very pro-marriage. That's kind of my thing. Like, we kind of move away from it in society. A lot of people, in their, there's reasons people have positive and negative views of that. There's some people are a little bit too flighty about it. Some people are too negative. We have red pill movements and manosphere stuff, and feminism, and like there's just so many factors that are messing with the way that we have relationships in the modern era. So, but at the end, we surmise that long-term relationships with discipline are very difficult but very rewarding. So then we're going to move on to the mental health. So we have interest in mental illness, which started in the 1700s. Often the mental disorders were dealt with medical interventions. We didn't really have a lot of experience with psychology or anything like that prior to, like, Sigmund Freud and those things. But even Sigmund Freud did the medical interventions, nasal surgeries, interesting things like that. They had a lot of I'm sure it made sense at the time. I don't know what that's about, but so we have the clinical psychology or abnormal psychology, which is how we deal with mental health in the modern age. We have psychologists who are focused solely on the mental health aspect of things. We have psychiatrists who deal with physical and mental health. What is mental illness? Well, we have psychopathology, which is a breaking down of the psyche. And there's multitudes of known disorders we try to compile. So he talks about the DSM, which we often get talked about. The DSM-5 put together the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So we have, it's put together by the physicians and released by the American Psychiatric Association. The current version is DSM-5. Psychologists deal with clinical diagnosis. They can't, give you. We can't get treated for just feeling a little sad that day. It has to be diagnosed to be treated. Insurance has to accept the treatment. So what constitutes a disorder? Well, a disorder is a clinically significant disturbance in cognition, emotion, or behavior. It has to be clinically significant and affect your life in a major way. These decisions are made in the field by clinicians. There's no hard and fast rule for diagnosing illnesses, mental illnesses. These are things that we just go with, And then disorders. Oh, sorry. A disorder is clinically significant. Yeah, cognitive issues. So these are like three different kinds of kind of things that can be a part of these. So cognitive issues are not being able to control your thoughts. Emotional issues are not being able to control your emotions, and behavioral issues, you can't control your behavior. Disorders must be based on underlying psychology, biology, or development. It can be a combination of these. Mental disorders usually cause distress at home or at work. Occasionally, the disordered individual is not distressed. The harm is felt by others around them. This is common for narcissists and things like that. Manipulative people. Often substance abuse people, that don't think that they're things affecting them, but it is. So we have disorders are not able to be culturally normative events. We don't accept situational depression caused by life events as disorders. So, and bereavement is mentioned, where, if a loved one dies, of course you're going to be sad. It can be a disorder if time goes by for too long and nothing changes. We have meditation or certain religious practices and beliefs. Many can seem delusional, but they're not considered mental disorders. Meditation practices, stuff like that. So we have criminality and terrorism, terroristic political action. Those things can be caused by mental illness, but it doesn't mean that there's mental illness. A criminal might be mentally ill when they commit a crime, but they may not. And then we have disorders that can overlap, but they have similar treatments. So often clinical diagnosis is not necessarily done. Sometimes they can be pretty loose with how they diagnose things. I know that. I guess it's kind of interesting because I don't remember him mentioning ADHD in this thing at all. I wonder if he had anything to say about that. Anyways, they have because I think that those overlap, and it can be treated as depression, it can be treated as anxiety, but I don't know. I think that sometimes it's they're too loose with diagnosing, but it's hard to say. So how do you organize disorders? They can be an old view is that there's two major axes of disorders. The axis one is the disease-like disorders with the sudden onset, or that just seem like something you catch. Then you have the axis two, personality disorders or character disorders, or developmental disorders. We have a diathesis stress model. We have the theory that inherent vulnerability or diathesis leads to disorders when stressed. So like people may be predisposed towards depression, but they're not going to be born with depression. They're going to get depression based on some event that happens. So we have a theory. Yeah, okay, I got that. Hierarchical. So he mentions a newer model called the hierarchical taxonomy of psychopathology, or the HITOP. And that's a newer model wherein disorders are categorized in a hierarchy. We have a factor of psychopathology, or a P factor, which is a general level of how psychologically healthy a person is. It could be like their tendency towards negative sides of Big Five personality scales, stuff like that. So we have our 6 subfactors. Somatoform disorders are psychological disorders, but that are body centric, such as hysterical blindness. He didn't really go into that because it's not something that we see a lot anymore. Then we have the internalizing disorders, which are negative emotion directed at the self, linked to neuroticism on the five-factor scale of self. We have depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and stuff like that, and the eternal disorders. And we have 3 are thought disorders: delusions, magical thinking, seeing patterns and randomness, related to those are things that are related to openness traits on the 5-factor scale. So like low openness would cause things like that, or too high. Disinhibited externalizing, things like impulsivity disorders, self-control linked to conscientiousness. We have antagonistic externalizing, callousness causing harm to others, antisocial, narcissism, borderline disorders. This is often correlated with criminality. 6 is detachment disorders, people cut off from the world. So we have internalizing spectra, disorders that involve low mood and fear, sexual disorders or binge eating, depression, anxiety. Phobias are specific and overwhelming fears. They can be related to ancestral things that would kill us in the past, or trauma-induced fears. This is something that could be progressive desensitization, curing phobias. We have panic disorders, which condition you to avoid things. So like, you go out and you get scared at the mall, so you don't want to go to the mall anymore, and then eventually you get scared of everywhere. And then you can get things like agoraphobia, where you're just afraid to even leave your room. So we have the depression disorders, such as major depressive disorder, which is an overwhelming sadness that does not go away, anhedonia, drop in joy or happiness, and then depression can cause weight gain or loss, sleep issues, psychomotor problems, and self-esteem is a buffer for depression. And then suicidal ideation is also a major effect of depression. So then we have our thought disorders, like bipolar disorder, combination of internalizing and thought disorder. This is is characterized by periods of high and low energy, hypomania or mania. People in manic states can like do crazy stuff, like start businesses, and then it just wears off, and then they're just depressed. So then we have bipolar 1, which is full mania or full depression. We have bipolar 2, which is less intense mania. We have longer highs and lows. And this is also bipolar is a genetic. Well, it's not a genetic, but it's thought to be genetic. It runs in families at least. And then lithium is a common treatment for the depression. So let's see. Yeah, hang on. I'm gonna check something real quick. Let's see. Do we have properties? There it is. Okay. Got it. All right. All right. So we have our schizophrenia disorders, which are thought disorders. This is something that's like a delusional disorder with hallucinations, possibly. It also can cause these side effects like anhedonia and catatonia, which are just not feeling good, bad movement, things like that. We have externalizing disorders, which are things like substance abuse disorders, which is something that is not all. There's some debate on what makes it a disorder. Is it the addiction itself that has a disorder? Does it matter if it affects your life or not? It's a lot of times it's just something that a lack of control over the disorder is what might cause people to seek treatment for that. We have antagonistic externalizing disorders, like narcissistic personality disorder, which is characterized by a sense of security, superiority, or not security, a sense of superiority and entitlement, and it can cause people to exploit other people very easily. And we have our borderline personality disorder, which is a self-regulation of emotion and attachment. They call it that because it comes from the borderline between neurosis and delusional psychosis. So we have our detachment disorders, which is something like the schizoid disorder, where there's a split between someone's emotions and their emotional effect, or their affect, is that how you say it? People who are detached from others and uninterested in relationships with others, unless they might be close to their parents, but that's it. So then we have our avoidance, which have a lack of connection, and it's usually because of a fear of connection. Like, they would connect if they were not afraid to connect, and so they do not connect with other people. So we have our treatments. One of the older treatments that's not really used anymore is psychoanalysis with free association and dream analysis, things like that, trying to work through the worldview. And then they have transference and countertransference, which is like transferring your allowing the person's anger to be directed at you, the therapist, in order to kind of unpack the thought process. And then you have your countertransference, which is you using your feelings toward the person you're analyzing as a way to kind of understand them. And then we have our cognitive behavioral therapy, working on thought processes and habits, which is where you kind of unpack that thought process and work on building positive habits in order to fix stuff in your thinking. So then we have our dialectical behavioral therapy, where they use mindfulness and things like that to increase your acceptance and commitment, and it just kind of just learning to live with whatever your disorder is. And it's very effective for borderline personality disorder, which is, from what I understand, it's a therapy that, or borderline can resolve. It's just over time, just with dialectical and acceptance, stuff like that. And it also says that a lot of times it doesn't matter what therapy you use, but using therapy will help. So you can, as long as you stick with a therapist and don't give up, a lot of times you can get better over time. So then we have our medical interventions, such as the SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They're often used for depression, anxiety, obsessive disorders. They take a long time to build up in your system, so they take a long time to work, and then they take a long time to go away if you quit them. They don't get super addictive, and but what's interesting about them to me is that they seem to work, but nobody is really sure how. So, and actually, a lot of people don't think they do anything, and there's a lot of people that think that they cause people to do bad things and stuff like that. It's just because people who commit large-scale acts of violence tend to be on SSRIs, which is not necessarily caused by the SSRIs. It's just because it could also be because there's an overlap between the mental disorder that causes them to be on SSRIs and whatever event led them to do the action. So that's kind of an interesting debate to work through. So then we have our benzodiazepines, which are anti-anxiety medicines, such like Valium or Xanax. They work very quickly, but people get addicted to them. So there's a kind of an issue. So, and then he mentions a cycle of medicines not working, but then them losing their effectiveness, or too many people get addicted, and then they have to make new medicines, and people get addicted to those, and it just kind of goes in a cycle. So then we also have our behavioral changes, which can help with things. I always find these to be really interesting, because it's like you have to diet and exercise to cure your depression, but your depression makes you not want to diet and exercise. So it's sort of like, it's kind of a fake it till you make it scenario where you kind of have to force yourself to do these positive actions in order to help your mental health. It's really difficult, but it's something that I've kind of gone through in my own journey with stuff like that. So we got that. So then we have sunlight's also a big thing. Getting outside, not staying in. We have our social changes. You can change your social group. Get rid of friends that are contributing to your negatives, and make new friends. Whatever. You can go to group therapy. You can go to things like Alcoholics Anonymous if you are have addiction problems. You do stuff like that. And then he also mentions the extreme types of therapy like electroshock. These are things that are not ever getting used really, but I mean they can still happen in very extreme cases, and they have there is some evidence that they can be effective in certain areas. So I also talked a little bit at the end about just how general therapy is it's not always effective. He says that maybe therapy helps a third of the people, doesn't help maybe two, 1/3 does nothing, 1/3 aren't going to be helped at all. And then we have like the general approach for therapy for mental health is to get patients away from being extremely debilitated to being just functional. So anyways, that's where I'm at. I have not gotten to the final lecture. Well, I've listened to it, but I have not put notes. So we're going to kind of quit there. These are two things that are pretty interesting to me. I know that I've had, my issues with mental health over time. I I went from being, what do you call it? Yeah, I mean, I have ADHD. It makes it really difficult to do a lot of stuff like sit here and talk and then not get distracted by every single thing in the room. But what's interesting about it is that I've been diagnosed. I got diagnosed with depression when I was like in high school, right? And then I went through all of that, and then I wound up getting on like anxiety for a while, and it's like it wasn't until I was like 20, 30 something that my wife, who has ADHD, is like, well, have you ever thought about having ADHD, right? And then I'm like, what do you mean? And then you find out that the ADHD has like depression and anxiety as side effects, right? So like people with ADHD will get misdiagnosed by these other things. And I guess it was kind of interesting to me that ADHD wasn't mentioned at all in this. I kind of really wonder what ADHD would go under. Like, is that a thought disorder? Like, I kind of think it might be, because I kind of doubt it's a mood disorder. Like, it could cause mood disorders, but I guess we'd probably stick that in the thought disorders. So there's that. So I think, let's see. I was going to take questions, but it does not appear that I'm having a great night tonight. So we're had one or two concurrent viewers. We'll just chalk that up to a learning experience. So unless anything pops up, I think I'm going to have to sign out for the night. So thanks for showing up, people who showed up. We will, this will be up so people can watch it later. So we'll see what happens. And one last chance, if anybody's got any questions or anything, just give it a minute or two before I sign out. Yeah, happened there. yeah, I'm kind of trying to figure out what I'm doing with these live streams. It's you can imagine it might be kind of boring, but it's like I'm just going over stuff. So um, we will be signing off for tonight, I guess. So thanks for joining me on this journey. Let's we will figure something out for later. Bye.